The sun had barely risen over the tranquil banks of the Bhagyarathi river, casting a warm glow over the gathering of mourners. The sons of Pandu, led by Yudhishthira, had been dwelling there for a month, observing the period of mourning after their great victory in the war against the Dhritarashtrasus. They prepared to leave the Kur city. Many high-souled sages and rishis arrived at the river bank, accompanied by their pupils. Among them were Vasa, Narada, Devala, Devasthana, and Kemwa, all renowned for their wisdom and ascetic success. The air was filled with the sweet scent of incense as thousands of Brahmanas offered their condolences to Yudhishthira, who sat on a throne-like seat, his heart heavy with grief. Narada, with his piercing gaze, approached Yudhishthira, first followed by the other rishis. They took their seats on costly carpets, accepting the worship suited to that period of mourning and impurity. As they sat in order around the king, Narada addressed him: "Through the might of your arms and the grace of Madhava, you have won this righteous victory over the whole earth, O Yudhishthira. Good luck, you have escaped with life from this dreadful battle. Do not you rejoice at having slain all your foes? Should you not gratify your friends now that you have obtained prosperity?" Yudhishthira's eyes welled up with tears as he replied, "Indeed, I have won the earth through my reliance on Krishna's arms and the strength of Bhima and Arjuna. But this heavy grief sits in my heart, that through covetousness I have caused this dreadful carnage of kinsmen, the death of Karna, the eldest son of Kunti, weighs heavily upon me. What will Subhadra say to me? What will the people of Dwaraka say when they learn of the slayer of Mantha?" Yudhishthira's voice trembled as he spoke of his guilt and grief. He recounted how Karna had been secretly born to Kunti, and how she had cast him into the Ganges river in a basket made of light materials, pretending that he was the son of Surya. Yudhishthira revealed that only after Karna's death did they come to know that he was their uterine brother. As tears streamed down his face, Yudhishthira confessed, "I have caused my brother to be slain, unaware of our kinship. If I had both Karna and Arjuna by my side, I could have vanquished Vasudeva himself. My wrath was cooled at the sight of Karna's feet, which resembled those of our mother Kunti."
In a distant past, a young man named Vasisna, believed to be the son of a Sutta, was born to Kunti in her maidenhood. This child would grow up to possess great energy and strength, and his destiny would be intertwined with the fate of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. He grew older. Vasisna became fascinated by the prowess of Bhima, Arjuna's exceptional skills with a bow, and the intelligence of Yudhishthira. He was also envious of the friendship between Arjuna and Krishna, as well as the affection that the people had for them. All these feelings of envy would ultimately lead him to form an alliance with Duryodhana, who shared his own ambitions. Vasisna's desire to surpass Arjuna in battle led him to approach Drona, a great teacher of the science of weapons. He requested that Drona teach him the Brahmastra, a powerful weapon that could only be wielded by a Brahmana or a Kshatriya who had practiced austere penances. Drona, however, refused, citing the fact that Vasisna was not born into a noble family and did not possess the necessary qualifications. Undeterred, Vasisna traveled to the Mahendra mountains, where he met Rama, a great sage who resided there. He presented himself as a Brahmana from the Prab clan and received Rama's blessings. Under Rama's guidance, Vasisna acquired all the weapons of war and became a favorite among the gods Gandharvas and Rakshasas. While residing on the Mahendra mountains, Vasisna often roamed the coastline armed with his bow and sword. One day, while wandering alone, he inadvertently slew a Homa belonging to a Brahmana who performed daily Agnautara rites. Recognizing his mistake, Vasisna apologized and offered to compensate the Brahmana by providing him with kind wealth and gems. However, the Brahmana was enraged by Vasisna's actions and cursed him, saying that while fighting Arjuna, the earth would swallow the wheel of Vasisna's chariot, and his foe would cut off his head. Despite this curse, Vasisna continued to seek to appease the Brahmana, but ultimately returned to Rama defeated and dejected. As he reflected on his actions, Vasisna realized that his fate was sealed, and that his destiny was inextricably linked with that of Arjuna, who would one day become his arch-nemesis. The young man's journey had just begun, but the path ahead of him would be fraught with challenges, conflicts, and ultimately a tragic confrontation with his own nemesis.
In the tranquil surroundings of Friggu's retreat, a remarkable encounter took place between Rama, the wise and powerful son of Jamedigni, and Karna. The skilled warrior Narada had spoken highly of Karna's prowess in battle, his self-discipline, and his devotion to his preceptor. Moved by these qualities, Rama decided to share with Karna the secrets of the Brahmo whip, on a mystical technique that could be wielded only by those who possessed great inner power. As they strolled through the vicinity of the retreat, Rama, exhausted from his intense penances, felt weak and lay down on Karna's lap. Unbeknownst to him, a blood-sucking worm named a lark had been lurking in the shadows, its 8 feet, and sharp teeth poised to strike. Despite feeling its presence piercing through his thigh, Karna remained still reluctant to disturb Rama's peaceful slumber. The worm continued to feed on Karna's blood, but when it touched Rama's body, he suddenly awoke with a start. "Alas, I have been made impure," he exclaimed in alarm. Karna explained the situation, and as Rama cast his eyes upon a lark, the worm let out its life breath and dissolved into nothingness. This astonishing event caught the attention of a Rakshasa named Densa, who had been trapped in the form of a worm for eons due to Friggu's curse. The Azure, now freed from his hellish existence, bowed down before Rama with gratitude. "You have rescued me from this wretched state," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I was once a great Asur who ravished the wife of Preu in a bygone era. Your ancestor's curse has been fulfilled through you, noble Rama." As Densa disappeared into the clouds, Rama turned to Karna with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "You have deceived me, Karna," he said sternly. "No Brahmana could endure such agony as you did. Your patience is that of a Kshatriya." Karna, fearing Rama's wrath, confessed his true nature. He was a Sud, the son of Radha, and not a member of Praju's lineage. Rama's expression softened slightly, but his words remained firm. "Since you have acted with falsehood to acquire the Brahma weapon, it shall never dwell within you," he declared. "This knowledge will elude you until your dying breath." With these parting words, Karna departed from Friggu's retreat, his heart heavy with shame. Upon arriving before Duryodhana, Karna announced that he had mastered all the weapons, unaware of the truth about the Brahma weapon and Rama's decree. Little did he know that this knowledge would forever remain beyond his grasp, a secret known only
In the vibrant city of Rajakura, capital of Chitrangada's kingdom in the land of Kalingas, a grand self-koi ceremony was underway. The air was filled with the sounds of joy and celebration as kings from far and wide had gathered to vie for the hand of the beautiful maiden. Among them was Duryodhana, son of Dhritarashtra. Accompanied by his trusted friend Karnas, the festivities commenced. A sea of noble figures emerged, each one more resplendent than the last. Sisupala, Jares, and Avishmeka, Vikra, Apotaramanila, Rukmai, and many others had arrived, their golden aenatas glistening in the sunlight. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as these mighty rulers took their seats, awaiting their turn to present themselves before the maiden. The maiden, accompanied by her nurse and a guard of eunuchs, made her way into the arena, her fair complexion radiant amidst the throng of suitors. As she passed among them, each king in turn presented himself, but Duryodhana's eyes gleamed with an unyielding passion as he beheld her. When it was his turn to approach, he commanded the maiden to stop, disregarding the other kings. The air grew thick with tension as Duryodhana, intoxicated by pride and bolstered by his confidence in Bhishma and Drona, snatched a maiden onto his chariot, determined to claim her for himself. The outraged kings rose up, their faces set with determination as they shouted, "Put on your coats of mail, let the cars be made ready." The sound of clashing steel echoed through the city as Karna, that master of all wielders of arms, rode alongside Duryodhana's chariot. With each arrow he loosed, the ground was strewn with felled bows and arrows, their owners left defenseless as the battle raged on. Karna moved with unyielding ferocity, his hands a blur as he struck down king after king. Some were left without their drivers, others fled in disarray, while still more turned tail, their hearts heavy with defeat. Duryodhana too rode triumphantly alongside Karna. The maiden, secure on his chariot, the streets of Rajakura ran red with the blood of the vanquished as Karna's arrows rained down upon them. The king's cries grew fainter, their bows and arrows shattered on the ground. As the dust settled, the remnants of the defeated armies turned to flee, their faces etched with shame, protected by Karna's unyielding prowess. Duryodhana emerged victorious, his chariot carrying him and the maiden towards the city known as the Elephant's Gate. The sound of cheering echoed through the streets as they rode into the city, their triumph echoing through the land. In the realm of ancient India, a legendary warrior named Karna was renowned for his unmatched prowess. On the battlefield his fame had reached far and wide, even to the kingdom of Magadha, ruled by the mighty King Jarasandha. Impressed by Karna's reputation, Jarasandha issued a challenge, a single combat against the great warrior. The stage was set for an epic showdown between two titans. Both Karna and Jarasandha were well versed in the celestial arts of warfare, and their battle raged on with a ferocity that shook the land. Arrows flew through the air, swords clashed, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. The fight was fierce and unrelenting, with neither side giving quarter as the combatants exhausted their ammunition and shattered their armor. They resorted to bare-handed combat. Karna, with his unmatched strength, seemed poised to deliver the final blow. Jarasandha's body began to falter, but just as Karna was about to strike the decisive blow, he felt a pang of pain in his heart. He realized that this battle was not worth the cost of taking another life. Moved by a newfound sense of compassion, Jarasandha addressed Karna with words of gratitude. "I am pleased for the gesture of friendship." He gifted Karna the town of Malana, expanding his dominion over Champa. This victory cemented Karna's reputation as a mighty warrior, and his fame spread far and wide. However, fate had other plans for Karna. The god Indra, disguised in a celestial form, appeared before him and requested that he part with his sacred coat of mail and earrings. Enchanted by the divine illusion, Karna surrendered these precious possessions. Divested of his armor and bereft of his earrings, Karna was left vulnerable to attack. It was on this fateful day that Arjuna, one of the Pandava brothers, faced off against Karna in the presence of Vasudeva. The battle was fierce, but ultimately it was Arjuna who emerged victorious, striking down Karna with the sorrowful heart. The news of Karna's demise spread. His brother, the narrator, reflected on the circumstances that led to his downfall. He recalled the curse that had been placed upon him by a Brahmana, as well as the boon granted to their mother Kunti, the illusion cast by Indra, and the depreciation he suffered at the hands of Bhishma also weighed heavily on his mind. In the end, it was not just one event or circumstance that led to Karna's fall, but a complex web of factors that had been woven around him. His brother's words were a poignant reminder that even the greatest warriors are not immune to fate and the whims of the gods. In the midst of a summer gathering, the celestial Rishi Narada fell silent, his words lingering in the air like a whispered secret. The royal sage Yudhishthira, once filled with hope and promise, now sat shrouded in grief, his eyes downcast as if weighed down by an unseen burden. His mother Kunti approached him with a mix of sorrow and concern etched on her face. As she drew near, her own tears began to flow like the gentle rain that nourishes the parched earth. Her voice trembled, but her words were laced with a deep understanding born from years of watching her son struggle against the tides of fate. "O mighty arm, Yudhishthira," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "it does not become you to succumb to such sorrow. You must not let grief consume you. Listen to what I have to say." Kunti's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and calming. She recounted the attempts she and Surya, the god of the sun, had made to inform Karna of his true lineage and his brotherly bond with Yudhishthira. "We tried everything," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "We spoke to him in dreams. We pleaded with him in person, but he refused to listen, consumed as he was by the influence of time itself." Yudhishthira's eyes flashed with anger and frustration as he listened to his mother's words. His heart, once filled with hope and promise, now felt like a heavy weight crushing him beneath its burden. "If only you had been more open with me," he said, his voice shaking with sorrow. "If only you had shared your counsel with me, perhaps I could have avoided this great affliction." As the words spilled from his lips, Kunti's face contorted in anguish. She knew that her son's grief was not just for himself, but for all those he loved, his brothers, his friends, and his people. She tried to reason with him to calm the storm that raged within him, but Yudhishthira's words cut deep like a sharp blade, slicing through the fabric of their love in a moment of raw emotion. Yudhishthira cursed all women, condemning them to secrecy and silence. His words were like a wild tempest, shaking the very foundations of their world. Kunti's heart broke at the weight of his sorrow, and she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As the darkness closed in around him, Yudhishthira's thoughts turned to all those he loved. His sons, his grandsons, his friends, and kinsmen, his mind was a maelstrom of anxiety and grief like a fire raging out of control, consuming everything in it.
The sun had set on the battle-scared landscape of Kurukshetra, casting a golden glow over the devastation that lay before them. Yudhishthira, the righteous king, stood amidst the ruins, his heart heavy with grief and sorrow. He gazed upon the lifeless form of Karna, the mighty warrior who had fallen to Arjuna's arrow. Arjuna. Yudhishthira said, his voice trembling with emotion, "If only we had lived a life of simplicity in the cities of Vrishas and Anhakas, this calamity would not have befallen us. We have brought about our own downfall by slaying our kinsmen. What is the use of our valor and might when it has led to such destruction?" He sighed repeatedly, his eyes welling up with tears, as he surveyed the carnage before him. "Fie on the ways of Kshatriyas," he lamented. "We have been consumed by pride, arrogance, and a lust for power. We have neglected the path of forgiveness, self-restraint, and purity." Yudhishthira spoke his words carried on the wind, echoing through the desolate landscape like a dirge. He remembered the countless lives that had been lost, the families torn apart, and the innocents slain in the name of power and ambition. "We have brought about our own downfall," he repeated, his voice cracking with sorrow. "We have committed a grave sin by slaying those who did not deserve to die. We are now bearing the weight of existence, stripped of friends and all that is dear to you." Arjuna listened attentively as Yudhishthira poured out his heart, his words painting a vivid picture of the devastation that had been wrought. The king's lamentation was like a cry from the depths of his soul, a plea for forgiveness and redemption. As he finished speaking, Yudhishthira fell silent, his chest heaving with sobs. Arjuna approached him, placing a hand on his brother's shoulder in a gesture of comfort and understanding. The younger king looked up at Yudhishthira, his eyes filled with compassion and empathy. "Brother," Arjuna said softly, "your words are like a balm to my soul. I too have felt the weight of our actions, the burden of our guilt. But we must not forget that we have also brought about a great victory, one that has restored peace to the land." Yudhishthira looked up at Arjuna, his eyes red-rimmed and wary. "I will go to the woods," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will renounce all worldly ties and seek redemption in the forest. I have no need for kingdom or pleasure, only peace and forgiveness." And with that youth,
The sun had just begun to set on the kingdom of Hastinapura, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. Arjuna, the renowned warrior and prince, stood before his brother Yudhishthira, his eyes blazing with the fierce intensity of King. Arjuna began, his voice low and urgent, "I grieve to see this great agitation of the heart having achieved such a superhuman feat. Thou art bent upon forsaking this great prosperity." He paused, his gaze piercing as he studied Yudhishthira's face. "Why shouldst thou abandon everything through fickleness of heart?" Yudhishthira, his eyes downcast, seemed lost in thought. Arjuna's words struck a chord within him, and for a moment he forgot the weight of his responsibilities as king. But then his expression hardened, and he spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "I have slain my foes, and I have acquired the sovereignty of the earth, which has been won through observance of the duties of our own order. But what is the use of all this wealth and power if it brings only suffering and pain?" Arjuna's eyes flashed with anger, but he restrained himself, his voice taking on a persuasive tone. "O king, where on earth hath the eunuch or a person of procrastination ever acquired sovereignty? Why then didst thou, insensate with rage, slay all the kings of the earth?" As Arjuna spoke, Yudhishthira's eyes began to cloud over, and he seemed to sink into his own thoughts once more. Arjuna pressed on his words, weaving a complex tapestry of argument and persuasion. "He that would live by mendicancy cannot by any act of his enjoy the good things of the earth. Devastated of prosperity and without resources, he can never win fame on earth or acquire sons and animals." Yudhishthira's eyes snapped back into focus, and for a moment Arjuna thought he saw a glimmer of understanding in their depths. But then his brother's face hardened once more, and he spoke in a voice that was cold and detached. "I will not be swayed by your words, Arjuna. I have made up my mind to renounce all this wealth and power and live the life of a mendicant." Arjuna's face fell, his eyes clouding over with disappointment. He knew that his brother would not be easily swayed from his decision. But he also knew that Yudhishthira was being foolish, that he was throwing away a great opportunity. For greatness as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in a darkening shadow, Arjuna spoke again, his voice low and urgent, King, do not be blinded by your folly. You are born into this.
The sun had just begun to rise over the vast expanse of the forest, casting a warm glow over the dense foliage. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, stood before his friend Arjuna, his eyes shining with a deep sense of purpose. Arjuna, he said, his voice low and measured, for a little, while I ask you to concentrate your attention and fix your mind on your inner soul. If you listen to my words in such a state of mindfulness, they will resonate deeply within you. As Arjuna nodded in understanding, Yudhishthira began to speak of his desire to renounce the worldly life and tread the path of the righteous. I shall abandon all pleasures and observances, he declared, and take up residence in the forest, living on fruit and roots, like the animals that dwell there. He described how he would perform ablutions at dawn and dusk, pouring libations onto the sacred fire, and thin himself through austerities, covering his body with skins and wearing matted locks. As Yudhishthira spoke his words, painted vivid pictures in Arjuna's mind. He envisioned his friend wandering through the forest, listening to the sweet sounds of birds and animals, and savoring the fragrance of blooming flowers. I shall not harm any creature, Yudhishthira continued, whether they dwell in villages or towns. I shall live a retired life devoted to contemplation, and gratify the Pitras and deities with offerings of wild fruits and spring water. Yudhishthira's words flowed like a river, carrying Arjuna along on a tide of wonder. He described how he would wander over the earth, breaking free from desire and attachment, preserving equanimity in success and failure, and earning great ascetic merit. I shall behave neither like one who is fond of life, nor like one who is about to die, he said, his eyes shining with a deep sense of detachment. As Yudhishthira spoke of his desire for liberation from the cycle of birth and death, Arjuna felt the sense of awe wash over him. His friend's words were infused with a deep wisdom born of reflection on the fleeting nature of worldly life. Reflecting on these circumstances, Yudhishthira said, I have come to understand that true happiness lies in renouncing the world and embracing a path of fearlessness. And the silence that followed, Arjuna felt a sense of reverence for his friend's wisdom. He knew that Yudhishthira's words were not just the musings of a king, but the distilled essence of a lifetime of contemplation. As the sun continued its ascent into the sky, casting a warm glow over the forest, Yudhishthira stood tall, his eyes shining with a deep sense of purpose. The sun had barely risen over the kingdom of Hastinapura, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets. Bhimasena, one of the 5 Pandava brothers, stood before their king. Yudhishthira, his voice filled with a mix of concern and frustration. Your understanding, O King Bhimasena, has become blind to the truths like that of a foolish reciter of the Veda who repeats the scriptures without truly comprehending them. You have led us down a path of destruction, slaying our enemies and claiming the kingdom as our own. But is this not a life of idleness? Should we not be seeking forgiveness, compassion, and pity for those we have vanquished? Bhimasena's words were laced with a deep sense of longing. He remembered the days when they had been wandering mendicants, living off the charity of others. As they journeyed towards their destiny, we could have lived that way. Still, he said, his voice trembling with emotion, we would not have had to take up arms and slay a single creature. The terrible battle between the rulers of the earth would never have taken place. He spoke. Bhimasena's thoughts turned to the wise men who had counseled them on their duties. As Kshatriyas, they had declared that those who stood in the way of the rightful ruler should be slain, and so it was that they had fought against the Dhritarashtra's. But now with the kingdom won, Bhimasena felt a sense of unease. We have become objects of censure, O Bharata, he said, his voice heavy with regret. We follow your example, eldest brother, because we are bound by our duty as Kshatriyas. We possess mighty arms and great energy, but we are obedient to you as if we were helpless. And yet when people see us thus, they must think that in respect of the acquisition of our objects, we are entirely powerless. Bhimasena paused, his eyes searching Yudhishthira's face for understanding. The learned have said that all this is food for the strong. He continued that the world is ours to enjoy, and that those who stand in the way should be slain. But what of our own duty as Kshatriyas? Should we not strive to govern the earth with wisdom and justice? See, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Bhimasena's words hung in the air like a challenge. Yudhishthira
listened intently, his face a mask of calm contemplation. The weight of their actions rested on him, and he knew that the decision to govern or renounce was one that would shape the fate of their kingdom forever. In the silence that followed Bemesna's words seemed to take on a life of their own. They echoed through the streets of Hastin. In the midst of a serene forest, a group of Brahmana, youth, young and inexperienced, had abandoned their homes in pursuit of a life of renunciation. They had become enamored with the idea of living as Brahmacarans, dedicating themselves to spiritual pursuits without worldly attachments. Indra, the mighty king of the gods, took pity on them and assumed the form of a radiant golden bird of birds. Sakra addressed the youths in a voice that echoed through the forest, saying, "Those who subsist upon the remnants of sacrifices are the most virtuous of men. Their lives are worthy of praise, for they have attained the highest end. The rishis, as they were known, listened intently to the bird's words, their faces aglow with curiosity. However, Sakra's words soon turned stern, and he revealed his true intention. "You do not subsist upon the remnants of sacrifices. You live on offal, and your lives are impure. I do not applaud you." The rishis were taken aback by the bird's harsh criticism, but they remained open to his guidance. Sakra continued, "Tell me, O rishis, what is it that you consider beneficial? My words have inspired you with great faith." The youths, eager to learn from the wise bird, replied, "We regard our course of life as highly blessed. We desire to know your counsel." The bird's expression softened, and he said, "If you do not refuse me your faith, I shall impart upon you words that are true and beneficial." The rishis nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with anticipation. Sakra began to teach them the sacred order of life. He declared among quadrupeds, "The cow is supreme among metals, gold reigns among words, mantras hold sway, and among bet the Brahmanas are the greatest." The bird explained that these principles governed every aspect of a Brahmana's life from birth to death. The Sakra spoke his words wove a tapestry of wisdom. He revealed that true success depended on one's devotion to their own soul, regarding it as a deity worthy of reverence. He described the three paths to success, following the sun, moon, or stars, each representing a different aspect of human striving. The bird then turned to the rishis and said, "Those who censure action are of little understanding, and in person they abandon the eternal paths of the gods, the rishis, and Brahma, and thus attain disapproved paths." Sakra emphasized that living in accordance with ordinance was the highest form of asceticism. He instructed them to perform sacrifices and penances, such as gifts, worshipping the gods, studying the Vedas, and honoring their preceptors. These actions, he declared, were the austerest of penances, capable of granting the gods their.
In the midst of a lively discussion, Nakula, the mighty armed and wise prince, gazed at his brother Arjuna with an intensity that bordered on reason's fire. The gods themselves have established their sacred fires in the region known as Vaisakib. Nakula began his words dripping with conviction. "Know therefore, O king, that even the divine beings depend upon the fruits of action." Arjuna listened intently, his eyes locked onto Nakula's copper-hued face. The prince continued, "The Pitras, those benevolent spirits who nourish the lives of all beings, including even disbelievers, observe the ordinances declared in the Vedas and are engaged in action." Nakula's words were laced with a gentle rebuke. "Those who reject these teachings, which emphasize the importance of action, are okay nothing but atheists." Nakula spoke. He seemed to conjure up visions of the sacred texts. "The person who is learned in the Vedas and follows their declarations in all his acts attains the highest region of heaven by the way of the deities," he said with a serene smile. "And this domestic mode of life, O king, has been extolled by all those acquainted with Vedic truths as superior to all other modes of living." Nakula's words painted a vivid picture of the ideal life, one where wealth was given away to worthy Brahmanas, and the soul was restrained. He who gives away his rightfully acquired wealth to these learned Brahmanas is regarded as the true renouncer, Nakula declared. But he also warned against those who in their haste to abandon domesticity fell prey to vanity and ignorance. The discussion unfolded. Nakula revealed the secrets of the four modes of life: domesticity, asceticism, mendicancy, and finally the renunciation of all attachments. He explained that the domestic mode, though seemingly simple, was fraught with difficulties and required great self-control, those who possess wealth and corn and animals, but fail to perform sacrifices. Her eternal sinecula cautioned the prince's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day carrying the listener along on a journey of discovery. He spoke of rishis who regarded study as sacrifice, and others who saw contemplation as a great sacrifice performed in the mind. The very gods covet the companionship of a regenerate person like this. Necula said, his voice filled with awe. He concluded, Necula gazed at Arjuna with a deep understanding. By refusing to spend your wealth on sacrifices, you are merely displaying your lack of faith. He said gently, I have never seen a king renounce his wealth except in the context of great sacrifices like the Rajashwiya, and Necula's words were laced with a sense of urgency. If
the sun had just begun to set over the vast expanse of the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. Sahadeva, one of the wise and learned princes of Hastinapura, stood before his brother king, Yudhishthira. Bharata, his eyes were filled with a deep sense of sorrow and concern as he began to speak. Me, dear brother, Sahadeva said, his voice trembling with emotion. I have come to realize that mere detachment from external objects is not enough for true success. We must also let go the attachments that reside within our minds. For what good is it to cast aside the trappings of wealth and power if we still covet them in our heart's kin? Yudhishthira listened intently, his expression a mixture of curiosity and understanding. Sahadeva continued, let us not aspire for the fleeting rewards of those who have merely cast off external attachments, but whose minds remain entangled with desires. No, let us strive to be like those who govern the earth with wisdom and compassion, having transcended all internal attachments. As he spoke, Sahadeva's words seemed to take on a life of their own, weaving a tapestry of insight and understanding. He paused for a moment, his gaze drifting upwards, as if seeking guidance from above. Consider, dear brother, he said, the word mama, mine, is but 2 letters, and yet it holds within it the power of death itself. But the opposite word, namama, not mine, consisting of 3 letters, is the very essence of eternal Brahma. It is a truth that transcends all duality. O King, Yudhishthira's eyes widened as he grasped the depth of Sahadeva's words. He saw in them a reflection of the ancient wisdom that had guided their ancestors for generations. If the soul, Sahadeva continued, is not subject to destruction, then our actions, whether we take life or destroy it, are but mere gestures. But if, as some believe, the soul and body are born together and destroyed together, then what purpose do our rituals and acts serve? The prince's words hung in the air like a challenge, forcing King Yudhishthira to confront the uncertainty that lay at the heart of existence. Sahadeva's voice took on a gentle tone as he offered his brother guidance. Drive away all doubts about the immortality of the soul, dear brother, he said, and follow in the footsteps of those who have walked this path before us, the righteous and wise ones who have transcended the fear of death. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in a soft blue twilight, Sahadeva's words seemed to take on a deeper significance. He spoke of the futility of living a life that is not lived in harmony with one's true. The sun had just begun to set over the tranquil Dwaita lake, casting a warm orange glow over the Pandavas as they sat in contemplative silence. King Yudhishthira, son of Kunti, and the righteous ruler sat among his brothers, their faces etched with concern. Draupadi, the beautiful queen, gazed at her husband with pleading eyes, her voice trembling as she spoke of Partha. Why do you not gladden your brothers? They resemble infuriated elephants in prowess. Yet you seem unmoved by their words, she said, her brow furrowed in worry. You once promised them a life of ease and prosperity after the defeat of Duryodhana. But now it seems you have abandoned that dream. Draupadi's gaze drifted to her husband's brothers, who sat like the lions and tigers, their eyes burning with determination. She knew how much they had suffered during their exile in the woods, and she felt a pang of sorrow for them. O King, I implore you, Draupadi continued, remember your words to us. When we were living by the Dwaita lake, you promised us that after defeating Duryodhana, we would enjoy the earth's riches and perform great sacrifices. Why do you now seem so depressed? Draupadi's words were laced with a deep understanding of her husband's nature. She knew how much he valued his duty as a king and how much he longed to protect his people.
But she also saw the toll that their exile had taken on him, and she feared for his sanity as she spoke Draupad's thoughts, turned to the words of her mother-in-law, Queen Kuntai, who had warned her about Yudhishthira's growing madness. She remembered how Kuntai had said, O Princess of Panchala, Yudhishthira will ever keep you in happiness, but through his folly he is about to make the feat futile. Draupadi's voice rose with urgency as she addressed her husband once more, O monarch. I beg of you, listen to your brothers and me. We are not asking for wealth or power, but for the protection of our people and the land. You have conquered many regions and earned the adoration of the Brahmanas. How can you now abandon your duties as a king? As she finished speaking, Draupadi's eyes met those of her husband, and she saw a glimmer of recognition there. For a moment it seemed that Yudhishthira would respond. But then his gaze dropped, and he fell silent. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the lake in shadows. The Pandavas sat in silence, their faces etched with concern for their troubled king.
In the midst of a lively discussion, Arjuna once again spoke with great respect for his eldest brother, Yudhishthira, whose wise words had ignited the conversation. The ruler Arjuna said, wields the rod of chastisement, guiding and protecting all subjects under their care. This rod is ever vigilant, even when others slumber. The wise have decreed that the rod of chastisement is none other than righteousness itself. He continued, this sacred rod safeguards not only righteousness, but also profit. It stands as a pillar upholding the three fundamental aspects of life: sustenance, wealth, and social order. Corn and riches are both protected by the rod's authority. Arjuna turned to Yudhishthira with an air of reverence. O king, possessed of great learning, take hold of this mighty rod and observe how it governs. The world went on to explain that various classes of people desist from sinful acts for different reasons. Some fear punishment at the hands of the ruler, others dread his wrath, while still others are held back by the prospect of a future reckoning in the afterlife. Yet another group is restrained by societal norms and expectations. Arjuna paused to emphasize the crucial role that chastisement plays in maintaining order. There exists a class of individuals who are kept in check solely by the rod's authority, lest they devour one another. If this sacred instrument did not maintain its vigilant presence, all would succumb to darkness. And Shashi then delved into the nature of the universe, observing that even animals live upon other creatures, with stronger ones preying on the weaker, just as a mongoose devours mice, a cat consumes a mongoose, and so forth. He said, all things are ultimately consumed by the destroyer. When their time comes, Arjuna's words turned to the subject of human existence. The man of knowledge understands that this world is an endless cycle of consumption. He sees that even the most austere ascetics cannot sustain themselves without taking life in some form. He noted that many creatures are so minute as to be barely perceptible, and their very existence depends on the fleeting nature of time. As Arjuna spoke, his words wove together a rich tapestry of observations about human society. He pointed out that those who fear chastisement alone walk the path of righteousness. A person without any fear, he said, never performs a sacrifice, never gives to charity, and never adheres to any engagement or compact. The conversation turned to the role of violence in achieving greatness without slaughter. No man has achieved fame, wealth, or subjects. Arjuna cited examples from mythology, noting that even Indra became great through his victory over Vritra. He observed that many gods are associated with violence and slaughter. As the discussion reached its climax,
As Vasampayana spoke them, his words echoed through the assembly, his voice trembling with emotion. You, my brother, Arjuna, he said, his eyes locked on Arjuna's. You who are wise and knowledgeable in all matters, you who have always been our guide and mentor, how can we not imitate your conduct? But alas, we cannot. His words poured out like a river, each sentence building upon the last. You are the ruler of men, conversant with all branches of knowledge. You know the righteous and unrighteous paths of the world, and nothing is unknown to you. Yet in this moment your understanding seems clouded by sorrow. His gaze swept across the assembly, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity. We have seen you suffer, Arjuna. We have seen you wrestle with doubts and fears, but we have also seen you overcome them time and again. And now in this moment of crisis, we implore you to recall your strength. As Demas spoke, his words wove a tapestry of memories, each one a reminder of the trials they had faced together. Remember, Arjuna, how we were once forced to flee our home dressed in deerskins and living in the great forests. Remember the kick you received from Kikika's wife. While we were in hiding, remember the battles. You fought against Ahijah and Chitrisna, and the distress inflicted by the Sindhu kingdom. His voice rose to a crescendo, his words pouring out like a torrent, and yet despite all these trials, you have always emerged victorious. You have always found a way to overcome your foes, to vanquish your doubts and fears. And now, Arjuna, we urge you to fight one final battle. The battle within them. His words hung in the air, like a challenge, a call to arms that resonated deep within every heart. Fight this battle with your mind alone, he urged. Conquer the foe that threatens to consume you and emerge victorious once more. For if you do not, Arjuna, what will be your condition? Will you not have to face these same foes again in another life? Ease them. Finished speaking, a hush fell over the assembly, each member lost in their own thoughts and reflections. But one thing was clear: the battle ahead would be fought with the mind, and only those who emerged victorious would claim their rightful place among the heroes of legend. In the midst of a grand feast, Yudhishthira gazed at his brother Bhima with a mixture of concern and wisdom. Bhima, my dear brother, he said, you covet sovereignty, but have you considered the costs? Are you prepared to be affected by the sins of discontent, endless attachment to earthly goods, the absence of tranquility, fully vanity and anxiety? Bhima looked up from his plate, his eyes shining with a hunger that seemed almost insatiable. What do you mean, brother? He asked, his voice laced with curiosity. Yudhishthira's expression turned grave. I speak of the fire within us, Bhima. When we feed it with desires and attachments, it blazes forth, consuming everything in its path. But when we starve it, it is extinguished. You must learn to conquer your stomach first, for only then can you hope to conquer the earth. Bhima's face fell, his eyes dropping as he contemplated Yudhishthira's words. He had always been driven by a desire for power and wealth, never stopping to consider the consequences of his actions. Yudhishthira continued, his voice filled with compassion. The acquisition and preservation of a kingdom are attended by both righteousness and unrighteousness. But you must free yourself from your great burdens and adopt renunciation. The tiger slays many animals to fill its own stomach, while other creatures live off the spoils of the strong. As he spoke, Yudhishthira seemed to gaze beyond Bhima's physical form, seeing the deeper truth within him. Kings who accept earthly possessions can never know contentment, he said gently. They are like a person who, having reached the top of a hill, looks down upon those below and sees their foolishness. Bhima listened intently, his expression changing as Yudhishthira's words struck home. He began to see himself through new eyes, to understand that true happiness lay not in external possessions, but in the cultivation of wisdom and inner peace. Yudhishthira's voice rose, filling the air with a sense of urgency. There are two paths before us, Bhima, the path of the Pitris and the path of the gods. Those who perform sacrifices walk the Pitra path, while those seeking salvation follow the God path by penances, by brahmacharya, by study of the Vedas. The great rishis have cast off their bodies and proceeded to regions beyond death. As Yudhishthira spoke, his words seemed to weave a spell around Bhima, drawing him into a world of timeless wisdom. Worldly enjoyments are but bonds, he said, and action is but a snare. Liberated from these two sins, one attains the highest end in that. In the midst of a solemn conversation, Yudhishthira's words hung heavy in the air like an unspoken promise. Arjuna, his brother, was overcome with sorrow and grief, his eyes welling up with tears as he gazed at his eldest sibling. He couldn't bear to see Yudhishthira so troubled, and his heart etched with a deep longing to comfort him. As he struggled to find the words, Arjuna's thoughts wandered back to an ancient tale that had been passed down through generations. It was the story of King Janak, a just ruler who had abandoned his kingdom and taken up a life of mendicancy. His queen Sita had watched in dismay as her husband shaved his head and donned the garb of a beggar. Why have you chosen this path, my lord? She asked him, her voice trembling with emotion. A handful of barley cannot sustain us, nor can it bring honor to our kingdom. Your actions contradict your words. You leave behind a prosperous realm for a life of wandering poverty. Sita's words cut deep into Janaka's heart, and he realized that his decision was not as noble as he had thought. He saw the pain in Sita's eyes and knew that he had caused her suffering. How can I live without causing harm to others? She asked him. As a king, you once supported thousands of Brahmins. Now you beg for food like a common man. Janaka was taken aback by his queen's words. He saw the truth in them and understood that his actions were not as selfless as he had believed. He knew that he had abandoned his responsibilities, leaving behind his people and his kingdom to fend for themselves. As Arjuna listened to Sita's words, he felt a sense of understanding wash over him. He realized that Yudhishthira was not alone in his struggles. Many had walked the path of renunciation before them, but few had truly succeeded in finding peace. Arjuna turned back to Yudhishthira and spoke with conviction. King Janaka was a wise man, but even he faltered when it came to discerning duty. We must not follow his example. Instead, we should observe the duties of domesticity by protecting all creatures, practicing charity, and cherishing our elders. We will find true bliss. Yudhishthira looked at Arjuna with newfound hope in his eyes. He knew that he had found a brother who understood him, and together they vowed to follow the path of righteousness, supporting one another as they navigated the complexities of life. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Yudhishthira and Arjuna sat in contemplative silence. They knew that their journey would be long and arduous, but with each other's support. The sun was setting over the tranquil landscape as Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, gazed out at his brother. Arjuna, Arjuna, he said, his voice filled with compassion, I am well versed in both the Vedas and the scriptures that lead to Brahma. I have studied the precepts of action and renunciation, and I know that there is a truth beyond words. Arjuna, ever the warrior, looked at Yudhishthira with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. But brother, he said, I am conversant only with weapons and the practices of heroes. I do not understand the scriptures as you do. Yudhishthira smiled kindly and replied, That is because you have been trained in the art of war, but not in the ways of the soul. Yudhishthira continued, his words pouring forth like a gentle stream. The truth that lies beyond words is known only to those who have dedicated themselves to asceticism and the study of the Vedas. It is a path that few can tread, for it requires great discipline and self-control. Arjuna listened intently, his eyes wide with wonder as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky. Yudhishthira spoke again. I have told you this, Arjuna, not to confuse or bewilder you, but to guide you on your journey. Remember that there are two paths, one of action and one of renunciation. The first is for those who are bound by their desires and actions, while the second is for those who seek liberation. Arjuna's face was a picture of concentration as he listened to his brother's words. But what of wealth? He asked finally. Yudhishthira's expression turned stern. Wealth is but an illusion, Arjuna. It brings only suffering and bondage. Those who are truly wise seek not wealth, but liberation from the cycle of birth and death. As the night wore on, Yudhishthira spoke of the great sages of old who had dedicated themselves to the study of the scriptures and the practice of asceticism. They were men of great wisdom, he said, his voice filled with reverence. Their hearts were pure, their minds clear, and their souls free from attachments. The stars reached their zenith in the sky. Yudhishthira's words came to an end. Arjuna sat in silence for a moment, his mind reeling with the weight of what he had heard. Then, with a newfound sense of purpose, he rose to his feet and bowed to his brother. I will follow your teachings, Yudhishthira, he said, his voice filled with devotion. As Vasampana finished recounting Yudhishthira's words, the wise ascetic Devasana stood up, his eyes shining with a deep understanding of the world. He began to speak in a voice that was both gentle and persuasive, drawing the attention of Ajatasattu. The king, O King Devasana, said, Arjuna has spoken the truth when he said that there is nothing greater than wealth. But let me tell you more about this subject, and listen carefully to my words. The king leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Devasana's face. As he continued to speak, you have won the earth through your righteousness, O Ajatasattu. Now it is up to you to make the most of this victory. There are 4 modes of life described in the Vedas, and I urge you to follow them one by one. At present, you should perform great sacrifices with lavish gifts. Some rishis dedicate themselves to the study of the Vedas, while others focus on acquiring knowledge. But even these ascetics are not immune to the call of action. Devasana paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the assembly as he searched for a way to convey his message. I have heard that some people, like the Vaikanisas, believe that one who does not seek wealth is superior to one who does. But I think this idea would lead to many mistakes. Men collect riches and gifts for sacrifices because it is ordained in the Vedas. If you give away your wealth without discerning whether it is going to those who truly deserve it, you may be committing a grave sin. A king's face showed a flicker of concern at Devasana's words, but the ascetic continued to speak with conviction. Charity is not an easy thing to practice, for one must first distinguish between the deserving and the undeserving. But when we give our wealth in accordance with the ordinances of the Vedas, We are fulfilling our duty as humans, and when we do this, we bring pleasure to ourselves and others. Devasthana's eyes sparkled as he told a story of Indra, the king of the gods who had surpassed all other deities. By performing sacrifices with lavish gifts, Indra possessed a boundless energy, outshone even the greatest of the gods through his devotion to sacrifice, and when he did this, he became the chief among them, and shone in heaven. The ascetic's words conjured up images of another great King Maruta who had vanquished Sakra himself with the power of his wealth. King Maruta, son of Avakshit, used his riches to perform a grand sacrifice that was attended by the goddess Sri herself. And when Harishchandra, a mortal man, performed sacrifices and gave generously, he earned great merit and happiness as Devasthana. Finished speaking the assembly. In a distant era, Devasthana shared an ancient tale with his listeners, one that would change their perspective on life forever. It was a story passed down from the great sage Vrihaspati, who had once conversed with Indra himself. As Vrihaspati began to speak, his words dripped like honey nectar into the ears of those gathered around him. Contentment, he said, is the highest heaven, the greatest bliss. There is nothing higher than contentment. He paused for a moment, allowing his listeners to absorb the weight of his words as he continued. Vrihaspati's eyes seemed to gaze into the very soul of Indra. When one draws in all their desires, like a tortoise withdrawing its limbs, he explained the natural radiance of their spirit begins to shine through. His voice took on a gentle quality as he spoke of the importance of compassion and self-control. Son of Kunti, Vrihaspati addressed Indra directly. Whichever path one chooses to follow, they will reap its corresponding rewards. Some praise peacefulness, while others extol the virtues of exertion. Some find solace in contemplation, while others value both peacefulness and effort. As he spoke, Vrihaspati's words seemed to paint a tapestry of diverse perspectives on life. He mentioned those who praised sacrifice, renunciation, and gifts, as well as those who lived in silence, meditation, or sovereignty. Each path, he emphasized, had its own merits. However, the sage's voice took on a note of gravitas as he concluded his discourse. The learned have observed that the most noble of all paths is one where no creature is harmed. He listed the virtues of truthfulness, justice, compassion, self-restraint, and modesty, emphasizing their importance in achieving true fulfillment. Vrihaspati's words hung in the air like a benediction. Therefore, O son of Kunti, he urged Indra, follow this path with care. The Kshatriya who embodies these virtues will reign supreme. His sovereignty, a reflection of his inner balanced and compassionate. Devasthana finished sharing Vrihaspati's tale. The listeners were left to ponder its wisdom. They realized that true greatness lay not in external achievements, but in cultivating the qualities that would bring them closer to their own souls. In the silence that followed, it seemed as though the very spirits of the Rudras, Vasus, Aditya, Sandhyas, and hosts of kings had gathered around Devasthana's listeners. For in practicing the duties inculcated by Vrihaspati's words, they too could attain to a high end, one that would bring them peace, fulfillment, and liberation in this life and the next. In the midst of a somber atmosphere, Arjuna turned to his eldest brother King Yudhishthira with words of solace and guidance. O King, he began, you who are well versed in every duty and have acquired sovereignty through the practice of Kshatriya virtues, why do you continue to burn with grief? You have vanquished all your foes and conquered a vast empire without resistance. Your glory is renowned, and your name echoes throughout the land. As Arjuna spoke, his words dripped with conviction and compassion. He knew that Yudhishthira's sorrow was not for himself alone, but for their fallen comrades who had given their lives in battle. O King, he continued, death in battle is considered a noble act for Kshatriyas, more meritorious even than performing various sacrifices. This is the decree of the ordinances that govern our order. Arjuna's voice rose with emphasis as he declared penance and renunciation are the duties of Brahmanas, not of Kshatriyas like ourselves. Yudhishthira listened intently to his brother's words, his heart heavy with sorrow. He knew that Arjuna was right. Death in battle was an honorable fate for a Kshatriya, yet he couldn't shake off the grief that had taken hold of him. But Arjuna, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, what about those who have fallen? Have they not lost their chance at a noble end? Arjuna's expression softened as he replied, their souls are now free from the cycle of rebirth, sanctified by the sacrifice of their lives in battle. What has happened was ordained to happen. Even you, O King, cannot resist the will of destiny. As The sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the kingdom. Arjuna's words took on a sense of urgency. Almighty King, he said, his voice filled with conviction, you must cast off this sorrow and address yourself to action. Your heart is strong, and your will unbreakable. Remember that you are a Kshatriya, born to vanquish foes and conquer empires. He paused, his eyes locked on Yudhishthira's face. Conquer your own soul, O king, and engage in the performance of sacrifices and charity, just as Indra, though born a Brahmana, became a Kshatriya in spirit and battled with his sinful kin for 810 times. So too can you overcome your sorrow and emerge victorious. And that moment Arjuna's words seemed to awaken something within Yudhishthira. His grief began to lift, replaced by a sense of determination. He knew that he had the power to choose his path, to shape his own destiny as the stars. The Kuru king Dhritarashtra, born of Kunti, stood stunned as Arjuna spoke to him about his duties. Vesa, the wise sage from the island, intervened, saying that Arjuna's words were true. He reminded Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, that he was familiar with all the duties and should practice them accordingly. Vesa continued, a life of domesticity is the most difficult of all the 4 modes of life. You have a good knowledge of the Vedas' great ascetic merit, and it behooves you to bear like an ox the burden of your ancestral kingdom. He then began to explain the duties of Kshatriyas, which included sacrifice, learning, exertion, ambition, wielding the rod of punishment, protection of subjects, and knowledge of the Vedas. Vesa recited a verse from Brihaspati, saying that like a snake devouring a mouse, the earth devours a king who is inclined to peace, and a Brahmana who is exceedingly attached to a life of domesticity. He also mentioned the royal sage Sudyana, who obtained the highest success by wielding the rod of chastisement. Yudhishthira asked Vesa about Sudyama's story, and he began to narrate it. 2 brothers, Sankha and Laikata, lived in separate dwellings near a stream called Vahuda. One day, while Laikata was eating some ripe fruits from his brother's dwelling, Sankha returned home and caught him. Laikata confessed his mistake and asked Sankha to punish him as a thief. Sudyana, the king of the land, heard about Laikata's confession and invited him to meet with him. Laikata told the king that he had eaten some fruits without permission from his brother and asked for punishment. The king promised to fulfill his request, and after hearing Laikata's words, decided to pardon him. Instead, however, Sudyana then caused Laikata's hands to be cut off as a punishment, which made him bear the consequence of his actions. When Laikata returned to his brother Sankha, he forgave him and told him to perform ablutions in the sacred stream Vahuda to purify himself. As Laikata performed his ablutions, 2 new hands appeared at the end of his stumps, which filled him with wonder. His brother Sankha explained that this was a result of his penances, and that Providence had been the instrument behind it. Laikata asked why Sankha did not purify him earlier, to which he replied that he was not his chastiser, but rather the ruler who had punished him. Vesa concluded by saying that King Sudyama became eminent by this act and obtained the highest success, like Lord Deksha himself. He emphasized that wielding in a sacred gathering, Vesapayana shared a profound message from the great sage Krishnadvipayana to Ajatasattu, son of Kunti. Your brothers, O Yudhishthira, have earned their place in the world. He said, their wishes cherished during their time in the woods are now within reach. Rule the earth like Aetai, son of Nahasha, and enjoy happiness. For a while Ajatasattu listened intently as Krishnadvipayana continued, your journey has been marked by hardship, but that is behind you now. You have earned religious merit, wealth, and pleasure. Now it is time to repay the debts you owe to your ancestors, the gods, and those who beg of you. Krishnadvipayana's words were laced with wisdom, guiding Ajatasattu on the path of virtue. A king must not be swayed by lust or wrath. He said he must behave impartially like a father towards all his subjects. A king who fails to accomplish an act due to circumstances is not at fault. The sage then shared a tale of King Hayagrava, whose story would become a beacon for Ajatasattu's future endeavors. Hayagrava was a brave warrior who had slain many foes in battle. However, he was ultimately defeated and killed while fighting alone. Yet his actions were guided by duty, and he achieved great fame on earth. Krishnadvipayana explained that Hayagrava's story served as a reminder of the importance of protecting one's kingdom through policy and intelligence. He had ruled with vigor and humility, filling all the worlds with his fame. The virtuous king had performed diverse acts, leaving behind a legacy that would be cherished for eternity. As Vesampayana spoke, Ajatasattu listened with rapt attention, absorbing the wisdom of Krishnadvipayana's words. He knew that he must follow in Hayagrava's footsteps, ruling his kingdom with justice and compassion, and ultimately achieving greatness in the afterlife. The sage's message had ignited a fire within him, guiding him towards a path of virtue and righteousness.
The sun had set over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered before Yudhishthira. The son of Kantai, the young king's eyes were downcast, his brow furrowed in concern as he spoke to the venerable sage Vesami. Lord Yudhishthira began, I have tried every means to find solace in my grief. I have ruled this kingdom with wisdom and justice. But no matter how many triumphs we achieve, my heart remains heavy. The memories of my loved ones who fell in the great war